Welcome, everyone. Today is June 17th, 2020, and we're here with Tom Ryan and Barbara Engelhardt, his wife. I'm Kevin, Tom's son, and these are some of Tom's collected memories. And today's topic is Marilyn, again for the third time. Tom?
With our early retirement, I was only 57. We did a lot of adventurous travel, and we went to Holland in 2002. We'd been retired for like 5 years. We've been a lot of places, but we went to Holland and up and down the canals of Holland. It was beautiful. You could just jump on the riverboat and jump off the riverboat, and you'd be on land and back in the water again. And you looked out the window and you saw the Holland rolling by. We went to the flower market. We saw lots of tulips, and it was really a great trip. But near the end of it, Marilyn would get tired, and she'd say, "You go ahead and with the guide and into the town, and I'll just stay here and rest." So she was getting sick on the trip. And when it was over and we got on the airplane, and with the altitude and so on in the airplane, she got really sick and didn't know what was wrong. It was just kind of a overall, her whole body was being attacked for that. And so when we got home, we went to several doctors looking for a diagnosis. And she was tested for heart problems and then a cancer test into where they took a sample from her bone to see if she had cancer. And we just were worried. We knew it was serious, but couldn't get a diagnosis. Well, luckily, one night at McKee Hospital, Marilyn was there for tests. Dr. Strong happened to be on duty. Back then, they didn't have hospitalists who stayed on the hospital staff, but regular doctors who would take turns covering the hospital at night to give each other a spell off. And he happened to be on, and he was an internist and a specialist in the internal organs. And he looked at her chart and he just pronounced that she's got hepatitis C. And that's what? What's hepatitis C? Well, he explained it, that they didn't have any cure for it. And it was a virus that would attack the liver and destroy it very slowly. And that she'd actually had this disease for like 20 years. And she got it from a blood transfusion. And it turns out that the disease had spread through drug addicts who would use hypodermic needles, and they would share hypodermic needles, and they would give each other this virus. And it spread originally that way. Then they would sell their blood to get money for drugs. And she got some of that blood in a procedure where the doctor said, "Your blood count's a little low. We're going to give you a pint of blood just before we perform this surgery." She'd had 3 miscarriages, and they were trying to find a cure for that. But the blood turned out to be contaminated. They didn't know about hepatitis C at the time. That was 20 years before she was diagnosed. And they didn't have any tests for it. And so the blood would go through. Now, of course, blood is tested for it, and there's a cure for it, but too late for Marilyn. So she suffered through this gradual deterioration of her liver. It wasn't painful, but it was debilitating. And we couldn't continue long trips and so on. And this was after we had moved to Loveland and built a house, and had a house built. And we were living in the house, and we had a basement, but we thought we'll never use the basement. There's just 2 of us. We don't need it. But we kind of fixed it up, and Ginger and Kit came and lived in the basement because he had lost his job in Tennessee and they were looking for work in Colorado. And so they lived there in the basement for a while. Then they moved into a home of their own after he got a job. And Kevin would come and live in the basement. So we had a lot of company. During those first years in that house, every one of our kids came and lived in the basement. And we gradually built a bathroom and a shower and everything in the basement. So
it was actually bigger than our house here in Tokyo.
Yeah, the downstairs. And we got a dog too. We'd never had a dog before, but we had a dog in retirement. And she would go up the ramp and get outside through the doggy door and take care of her duty outside. It was a very nice house. Back to Marilyn. She discovered this hepatitis C, and we went into Denver and we had a specialist. The possibility was for a transplant, to transplant a liver into her from somebody that donated it. But he said that would not work in her case, and she was too old to do that, and it just wouldn't have worked anyway.
She also had diabetes.
Yes, right. She struggled with that, but she was a nurse, so she knew, and her mother had diabetes, so she knew about all the regimen, and she had pills of all kinds but there's no real cure for diabetes, just pills to help you live with it. And so she's had some illness now in her old age. She wasn't really old yet because we had retired so early. Luckily, we did that, and we had so many wonderful trips all over, not outside the country and in the country before this all happened. So she gradually deteriorated. And one of the biggest events I've talked about before is our trip to Glenwood Springs with the whole family riding on the Amtrak train, and then back to Denver again on the train and through the mountains. It was a beautiful retirement. And it was our 50th wedding anniversary. But she did all right on that. She just used pure desire, and she enjoyed it so much being with the family that she overlooked the tiredness that she would get, exhaustion that she would have. But when we got back to Loveland, she really started deteriorating and having long periods. So we just kind of waited it out. I said at the end, when her liver finally gave out, this was about when I was a kid, we used to pray for a happy death. I never knew what that meant, but in the parochial school, we prayed for a happy death. I guess the happy death would be that we were going to go to heaven. But Marilyn had about the nicest death you could have. It's a long term. She got to see all of her family. And in her last days, people came from all over to visit, and they'd stay here. And we'd call it, say that Marilyn had to be protected from too much visiting. So we called it an audience, that she could have an audience with different people that visited. Her brother came and his wife, and my sister came, and of course all the kids came. And so they had to take turns, and they'd go in one at a time and talk to her. And when she got tired, then they'd give that up and somebody else would come in, or she'd get a rest. So it was pretty well regulated. Chrissy, her granddaughter, she's really the kind of the fifth child we had. She had quit her job and came all the way out to Loveland to be with her grandmother in her last days. And she kind of took over and made sure she wasn't exhausted too much from all the visiting. But it was wonderful. She enjoyed all that. And then she had a peaceful death. And we had joined the Church of the Brethren, but in the meantime, we left the Church of the Brethren and joined the Presbyterian Church. But we didn't join until after Marilyn's death. And one of the presidents of our Kiwanis Club was a minister and also belonged to the Presbyterian Church. So I said, Paul, would you do a service for Marilyn at your church? And Ginger had joined that church, and Kit and the family were in the church when they were young, but Marilyn and I did not. But he did a wonderful job, and each of the kids, the children, her children, Marilyn's children, were to get up and give a remembrance, but it had to be written out, no meandering thoughts like that I'm doing right now. And they had to write it out on a piece of paper. And it turned out that Kevin, his father-in-law, was dying at the same time as Marilyn was in Tokyo, in Nagoya, actually. And so Kevin and Maki had to go down to Nagoya to minister to Maki's mother. And so Kevin wasn't there for the funeral. So he sent a 8x11 remembrance, and his brother Dan read it. And then each of the kids got up and talked about their mother at the funeral. It was a wonderful funeral. If anything, funeral can be wonderful, it was. It really was. And so I was alone, and I didn't handle loneliness very well. I would almost bump into the walls, and that big house, nobody was there, and I was all alone. And I thought I had a wonderful marriage, and to expect to have a second marriage was just out of I couldn't imagine it, because Marilyn was the only girlfriend, only serious love that I had. And no, she couldn't be replaced. And anyway, having two happy marriages was just not in the cards. Well, I decided to join the Church of the Brethren, the Presbyterian Church. And there were 20 of us in the new member class. And the pastor went around, he says, why did you join? And I went through my litany of all the different churches and things I had done. And so Wayne Nickerson, the pastor, said, well, Tom, how long are you going to be with us? I said, no, this is it. This is lifetime. I'm going to be here forever. Well, in the process, I said I was from Elgin, and it turned out that Barbara Engelhardt was born in Elgin at the same hospital where Marilyn had studied for her degree. So Barbara knew where Elgin was, and her father was a pastor of a church in Burlington. And so she would come down to Elgin because they didn't have a hospital there. And so that's how I met Barbara in church, actually. And we stuck up.
That was what, maybe 3 years after Mom died?
Yes. And in the meantime, I did a lot of volunteering. It was mostly therapy for me. I wasn't doing a do-gooder. It was a selfish thing for me, actually. And I went to the community kitchen, and I would go there at noon and help feed the homeless, would come in for a free lunch. And I did that sometimes, several times a week. And the kitchen was in the basement of the Presbyterian Church. So finally I got up the idea of going upstairs and learning more about this church that had a community kitchen. It reminded me a lot of what the Brethren did. The Brethren had sent me to Khartoum, where they had a mission, and I spent a couple of months there as kind of a substitute missionary. I went alone on that, but
which is a good point to finish up here, because Khartoum sounds like another topic.
A whole nother topic, right? All right.
Is there anything else you want to say about Mom? I do remember Dan and Ginger saying that after she died, that you would walk around and talk incessantly just
Yes.
talking all like, almost babbling for a long time, for
Yes.
about 6 months or a year at least. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
not good. But Kevin then came later, and we scattered Marilyn's ashes by her request on Boreas Pass above Breckenridge, Colorado, in the Rocky Mountains.
that's
And
right.
Kevin was able to come for that because by then everything was settled down in Tokyo. And so we had the whole family there for the scattering of the ashes and a weekend in the mountains of Colorado. So that's what where I want my ashes scattered to. So
Okay.
we'll
Well,
go on.
thank you very much. Yeah, we'll maybe take up this again in a different angle some other time. But good
Good,
enough for
good.
today. Thank you.
Thank you.